Greetings from North America. My name is Joey Holbert. I'm a postdoc at Washington State University. I'm going to talk about citizen science approaches to invasive species monitoring. The purpose is really just to demonstrate that there's a lot of diversity in project approaches, and there's a lot of different ways to engage citizens to enhance biosecurity. Today, I'm coming to you from the very northwest corner of the United States here in Washington. And I'm really privileged to get to learn and explore and research and study and discover on the traditional homelands of many Coast Salish peoples, but particularly the Puyallup tribe of Indians, where our research and extension center is. I'm going to start by introducing myself and a little bit about where I'm at in the US. I'm part of this Puyallup Research and Extension Center at Washington State University. And I'm mentored by Gary Chestagner and Marianne Elliott and Todd Murray. I'm really grateful for all the support we have and the partners that we have. There at WSU, we are leading a project called Forest Health Watch. This is our citizen science project to engage communities in research about trees and keeping trees healthy. Our first project was really focused on the dieback of red cedar, which is a climate change issue, and we engaged communities throughout the Northwest to report observations of healthy and unhealthy trees. But now we're shifting to an emerging tree disease called sooty bark disease, which is an emerging issue for many of our forests and native species in the Northwest. And I wanted to emphasize that, you know, in the face of an invasive species or a biological invasion, there's a lot of different avenues to invest our resources, and citizen science really fits into each one of these opportunities, if you will. So there's also a number of citizen science projects that are actively engaging communities in this space of biosurveillance and biosecurity. And there's a list of some of these projects on the Forest Health Community Science, Forest Health Citizen Science Community. It's forcefhcs.page. And I encourage you to add to this and improve it and build on that network. We're in the process of summarizing how citizen science projects are participating or engaging communities in all the different stages of a biological invasion. And this is a table that's in prep for a manuscript as part of a special issue in Frontiers. That's coming out soon, and I welcome you to reach out to me if you're interested in this. There's still lots of opportunity to collaborate in this if you're interested. But ultimately, there's a lot of different citizen science projects, and many of these projects are already demonstrating benefits to biosurveillance or biosecurity. So there's many projects, and there's many ways to advance or enhance biosecurity with citizen science. In these projects, there's a lot of different approaches, and I just wanted to highlight a few projects and a few approaches in case you're considering creating a citizen science project or leading a citizen science project. So there's one really great example in the Northwest or in the United States that uses this approach of mass participation where anyone can participate. And this is a project called the SOD Blitz, so Sudden Oak Death Blitz project. Following the invasion of Phytophthora species in California and Oregon in the United States, they launched this project to engage communities to monitor where trees are vulnerable and where trees are infected. And so Mateo and his team at UC Berkeley provide kits to any person or any individual that wants to participate and submit a sample. And with these kits, they collect a leaf, they fill out this card, and they send samples. And so it's really a great example of an approach that uses mass participation where anyone can participate. In contrast to that, there's other projects that really only engage a small core group, and they do really rigorous training to participate in that. And so in the United States, an example of this approach is this Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities app, where communities work together to train participants on how to use their tool and trains them on invasive species to look for. And I think this is really great for establishing plot networks within urban environments and in monitoring individual trees once you've been trained up. Another approach that has been helpful and useful in terms of community participation in biosurveillance and biosecurity is this term, or this category that's often referred to as passive surveillance, where some people just add observations on online platforms like iNaturalist, whether they know it's invasive or not. Sometimes I'll even add stuff on there, like I don't know if this moth is of concern or not, but maybe somebody's monitoring to see. And so, for example, there are some projects on iNaturalist, like this one, invasive forest pests of concern to the Northwest, where there's some known invasives in the United States, but they haven't reached the Northwest corner yet. So we're actively monitoring this collection to see if one of these invasive species is going to show up in Washington, so we can respond rapidly. We've done the same thing with this priority pest list provided by USDA, APHIS, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service. So they maintain a list of priority invasive forest pests and diseases they're concerned with. And if you just plug that list in, you can see where people are observing them on these tools. It's kind of a neat way to surveil what's out there while people are just adding them passively. So this is an example. Someone added this image of a velvet longhorn beetle. And in this case, the Oregon Department of Agriculture actually replied and responded and said, hey, did you collect a specimen of this? I'm really interested. And so this we see happen occasionally. And it's really a neat demonstration of the utility of these passive surveillance projects. Of course, each of these approaches has different pros and cons. For example, some projects, the mass participation might lend itself better to this unstructured sampling design, where you're just collecting observations from anywhere, and you have challenges there like sampling fragmentation and other things like that. But this is a dashboard from our red cedar dieback project, and we tried to counter that with an analysis that includes healthy and unhealthy trees. And I'm happy to discuss that more if anyone's interested in learning more about that. The other more structured way to do this would be to randomly pick trees, like we've done here in Portland, Oregon, where we randomly picked red cedar trees from the street tree database, and we asked community scientists to go and visit those trees specifically and report back whether they're healthy or not. So that's just an example of maybe the two different approaches you can use. This second approach definitely lends itself better to a more trained core group in a smaller area. It also might influence how you collect samples, or a certain approach may be better if you're interested in collecting physical samples or having physical samples collected. You might really need to invest in training and rigorous workshops to make sure your participants are really switched on and turned on to the methods and the protocols that you're using. Whereas if your project's just photo-based, you may not need as rigorous training, and it might be more appropriate for a mass participation type approach. Clearly, these type of samples also are relevant to the type of sampling you're doing, the type of protocols you're using, the type of tools you're using to collect the data. And depending on how complex all of that is, will determine whether you need to use an approach that's more focused on a small group or more rigorous training. So for example, even taking a diameter of a tree might be too complex for some of these mass participation projects, because not very many people have their own diameter tape. But most people can make do if you can explain how to use a measuring tape, for example. And then clearly the project scope, if you're relying on a really trained, switched on core group of volunteers or citizen scientists, they're probably not going to have the breadth, the sampling breadth that you would be able to access if you had a mass participation approach. Within all of this, there's also likely different social outcomes to consider. If you're doing a more trained, more core group, you might be including barriers to participation, or you might be selecting for those individuals that have time versus how, I guess there's things to think about, like how important, how big of an objective is diversity and equity and inclusion. Those kind of questions come in when you're thinking about which approach to use. Similarly, are you trying to empower the participants, and to what degree are you trying to empower them with skills, or are you trying to empower them with data that helps them make decisions, like figuring out what trees in their neighborhood are vulnerable to certain diseases, or are you giving them skills on how to measure and assess the health of a tree? All of those outcomes really depend on the approach that you can take and how you design your project. So in summary, we know that citizen science can enhance biosecurity. There's a lot of great projects doing it that you can learn from already, but there's a lot of different variation in how to do this and how to approach and how to engage communities. And each of these different approaches likely have different social outcomes. And so there's a lot to think about, but in general, there's probably no negative to engaging communities in biosurveillance. No matter what approach you use, it's probably good for keeping our trees healthy. So please contact me. You're welcome to contact me if there's anything I can do, or if you're interested in collaborating. But thanks for including me, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the conference. Thanks.